Have you ever been alone and thought you saw someone out of the corner of your eye? Maybe felt an immediate dread when in darkness, like you were being watched? For centuries, people all around the world report encounters with these shadowy humanoid figures. There are many theories as to what they are or why they're here. Some people believe it's just the mind playing tricks on you, while others believe it is something much more sinister. In tonight's episode of Horror Highway, we're going to take a look at 10 horrifying shadow people stories. Whether you think these stories are true is always up to you. When I first worked at Starbucks, people told me that the store it was in was haunted. I laughed it off. Last March, I started to see a shadow figure running out of the corner of my eye. It was tall and skinny, and as soon as I turned to look at it, he would vanish. I was obviously creeped out, but didn't say anything because I thought I was seeing things. Months later, my coworker started describing the same figure to me. I called him Wilson. He is fond of opening and closing doors, knocking things off shelves, setting off mousetraps, calling baristas names, and flickering the lights. He does this often in broad daylight in front of guests. The strangest thing is that my friend heard him whistling what sounded like an old miner's tune. I did some research and one name stood out to me. William Wilson died in 1901 in a mining accident at a Pacific Northwest company in Roseland, Washington. I don't work at that Starbucks anymore, but to this day, my friends there report that since I left, Wilson has been acting up, leaving freezer doors open and even appearing to one barista as a shadow on the wall. Before I left, I jokingly told Wilson that she was his new best friend. He's been scaring her to death ever since. I kind of miss Wilson. He used to keep me company when I worked shifts alone. I don't know why he is there, but one thing's for sure. He has no intention of leaving. So I'm currently 17, and recently had a very unsettling experience. Before explaining, I'd like to mention that I've always thought scientifically and doubted God or anything other than life and death, but this experience has given me doubts. It was a few days ago, as my friend slept over. She has been asleep for about an hour or so. I was on my phone texting people around 1 a.m. with my legs out of the covers due to the AC being off and the increasing heat of the room. There was a dim light on facing the wall to the left of me. Then, all at once, my legs got cold. I'm not sure if I felt a breeze or just got cold, and I felt another presence. This feeling made me feel sick, and I had a really bad feeling as to what this feeling meant. Right away, I looked to the right of me where my friend was asleep, and saw a figure sitting there, either facing the window or my bed frame. I saw it so clearly, yet I can't describe a single feature of the shadow figure or whatever it was, besides the fact it was sitting there and I felt like it had semi-long hair. I was not on any substances or drunk, nor was I tired. I felt complete shock and nothingness for however long I saw it. It felt so long, but I assume maybe a second or two. I'm not sure if I blinked or what happened, but it was gone in an instant. I started crying after going under the covers and processing it, since I'd lost my father 2 years before to an overdose, and always hoped in my mind that something exists after death. I have a sleep recorder app that catches any nighttime noises such as sleep talking, but I captured this knocking on my window at a fast pace for about 3 seconds at 2:47 a.m. I've been terrified these past few nights, yet also curious and needing answers. I'm not sure how old I was, maybe 11 to 13, but I was staying at my aunt's house, just her and I one night. We went to bed pretty late, so when this happened it was quite late into the night, possibly between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. I was sleeping on her couch, which faced a small hallway, and I felt a sudden wave of paranoia. I looked towards the hallway and started staring into it. It was pitch black, but I saw something even blacker peeking its head around the hallway entrance to look at me on the couch. It would look for a second, then pull its head back into the hallway, rinse and repeat. I didn't know shadow people existed, or even had the idea that they existed at that age, but I couldn't make out any features. It continued to peek around the corner almost in a taunting manner, like it wanted me to know that it was there. I don't normally sleep with my door open, as ever since this event, I've been pretty scared of hallways and dark areas. I've read in a prior post that seeing shadow people can be invoked by sleeping in odd places or different places, so maybe that influenced it? The house is also quite old. I thought it was just general paranoia making me see that figure, but I haven't experienced the same thing anywhere else. I was living in a smallish town last year with an interesting design. The front of the houses faced each other, but instead of streets, the front doors led to paths that formed something like a park walkway. The back of the houses opened on a horseshoe-type street. One area was in the middle of a couple apartment buildings, so it had a playground, basketball court, all that jazz. I went for a walk around 1 in the morning to smoke a joint, so I go to the area with the court, sit on a bench, and light one up. After maybe 3 minutes of smoking, I look a bit to my left and about 20 yards away, directly under a streetlight, are two very tall shapes. They're standing perfectly still, with no discernible features, and they were black. Not like a shadow person or a morph suit, but like Vanta black. They're sucking the light and warmth in. I know they're staring at me, and I could feel it. I could feel the hate, the absolute certainty that if they were to come any closer, my life would more than likely never be right again. Now it takes quite a fair bit to make me afraid, but what went through me was pure primal fear. I've seen ghosts by the dozen, and I've never been afraid. This was like staring the devil in the face and feeling the pure, unadulterated hatred radiating off of him. It took me about 10 minutes of just being frozen in fear before I could stand up and book it out of there. And in all the time I had my eyes on them, there was no movement of any kind, no sound, no indication they were alive. I've not seen that since, but it got me looking up shadow people and the like, and I guess, according to the people with more experience and knowledge, they weren't shadow people. Apparently due to their height, the darkness they were made of, and the feeling I got from them, they were demonic in origin. So that's my little story from hell. I'd love to hear if anyone else has experienced this kind of thing. I woke up one Saturday morning while everyone else was still asleep. I laid in bed for a while and stared at the gap between the door and the wall for some time, and wondering why the gap was reasonably bigger than I left last night. I usually left a small gap in the door so I could let some light into my room in case I needed to see in the dark. No windows, doors, etc. were open that could blow it more open that much. Then something weird happened as I further stared at the gap. A black shadow dashed across the door at an incredible speed. What startled me slightly was that it made my door sway. I could also hear fast footsteps, like it was running. At first, I thought it was my sister, but then I thought, no way she could have ran that fast. She had no reason to run in the morning. The house was so well lit and I could see the walls clearly, so I should have been able to see her clearly too. It was just a black shadow. I didn't get bothered by it much, so I just continued relaxing. This happened 4 years ago. I discovered shadow people recently and it reminded me of this experience. For some reason, I didn't think much of it all back then. When I think of it today, I'm surprised by how I wasn't bothered by it at all. Now I'm interested. If I can recall, this happened around a time when a previous owner of my house passed away. I need to get that confirmed. I don't have any mental health problems, so what exactly did I see? Was it those shadow people I've heard about? Could it have been watching me since the door was open more? I'm not really a paranormal person, but I'm very interested in finding answers. I wanted to ask the people if anyone has had any shadow people encounters, as I believe I have had a couple in the past. It might not sound like much, but it still gives me an uneasy feeling when I think about it. The scariest encounter I believe I had was when I was 11 or 12, and I had just gone to bed. This was when I had bunk beds, so I was high off the floor, maybe 6.5 feet. As I was drifting off, I heard an unknown voice whisper my name, seemingly right next to my head. I jolted up and looked around in the darkness and cracks of light streaming in, but saw nothing. It shook me to my young core, but I went back to bed. If I remember correctly, my dog died not very long after that happened. My other believed encounters are much less entertaining, as I'm not sure what was or is happening. When I was in high school, my game system was in the basement, so I'd spend time down there on weekend nights playing games. Now I have the best vision in my family. I don't wear contacts or glasses or anything, and yet, every now and then, I think I see a shadowy figure peering out from around a corner at me or standing just inside a doorway. It always disappears after a second or when I blink. Made late night trips for food or drinks or to return to my room very harrowing. Now, I could just be crazy. I wouldn't say my house is haunted. It was built in 2003, so it's still relatively new. However, knowing little about shadow people, I don't know if I can consider them a haunting or even if they're there. I don't know if this is even the case. Just felt the need to talk about it. Anybody else have similar stories or their own encounters? I think I just need to talk about it to feel better. I am in college and my dorm room is made up of the facade of 3 older dorm rooms. Ever since moving into my room in August, I've been experiencing weird things that I can't explain. The most common thing is seeing the silhouette of a man either standing by my window during the middle of the day with the lights on, or running past my bed to the other side of the room and disappearing. Most of these sightings happen in my peripheral vision, so I chalked it up to my imagination after a while. However, I've more recently been seeing the same thing in direct eyesight. It's a masculine figure, almost pitch black, with no facial features. It stands at roughly 6'2" and is a slim, standard build. I've also been waking up to the feeling of someone's pressure on my chest and breathing in my face. On more than one occasion, I've woken up to the feeling of being choked. I lived with a cat from October up until December, and my cat would constantly hiss at my window in the middle of the night and scratch at me whenever I would wake up to the feeling of something putting pressure on my chest. I've tried smudging my room with sage, but I am still witnessing these things. They're getting progressively worse the longer I live here. And to clarify before someone claims I'm going crazy or seeing things, 3 other people have witnessed this on separate occasions. If anyone knows what is happening or can provide any advice on what to do, I would really appreciate it. I was about 4 years old. It was summer and I was in bed, but it was still light out, and the older kids were all still playing outside, so I didn't want to be in bed. At the time, my mother used to put curlers in my hair before I would go to sleep, so I was passing time tilting my head back and forth, watching the light play through the curlers. All of a sudden, my shadow turned and looked at me. I was terrified. Shadows are supposed to do what you do. I could feel its pleasure at my fear. I laid down quickly, reasoning that my shadow would have to lay down too, and I wouldn't be able to see it looking at me. It didn't lay down. It stepped off the wall, touched me, and spoke. Its voice was high-pitched, but didn't sound human. This was too much. I screamed. I could hear my mother start down the hall, and the shadow looked startled, started back to the wall and lay down. But the movement wasn't the same as what a human would do. My mother told me I was just having a bad dream, but I hadn't been asleep. This actually happened a few years ago when I lived in a different town. I was up late one night on my phone, simply watching a bunch of videos and talking to internet friends. Eventually, my anxiety started randomly kicking in and the room felt really cold. I tried to shake it off by watching some cute cat videos to maybe soothe my nerves, but it just got worse and worse. I felt watched too, and I was practically trembling in my bed. I didn't want to look up from my phone, but through my peripheral vision, I saw a gleam of red. Then I really got scared. I decided to take a bold yet risky move. I looked up and saw these shadows in my room. They each had a set of 2 glowing red eyes. They just stared back at me, staring into my soul. I was absolutely terrified and wanted to scream. I couldn't though, because I was afraid if I did, they'd hurt or kill me. I just stared at these red-eyed shadow men for what was possibly hours. The only thing keeping me from jumping up and running around the house in a panic was the music from my earbuds. The shadow men left finally, just disappeared in the thin air. It was around 5 a.m. by the time they left. I was too afraid to go back to sleep, so I took my blanket and phone and watched TV in the living room. I lived in that house for another year with nothing else, until moving to the town and home I've been living in for a long while now. That's my only experience with shadow men. Several years ago, I had a terrifying experience. I never told my family about this experience for fear they would think I'm crazy or just had an overactive imagination, but I know what I saw and what I felt that night. Roughly around the mid-late fall of 2010, I was sitting in my bedroom on the floor just doodling in my sketchbook. I remember it being somewhat late at night, maybe 11 p.m., and everyone had gone to bed. Sitting in the silence of my room, I started to get tired, so I put my stuff away and jumped into bed. My room was a standard 10 by 10, with a window in the middle of one wall that overlooked our backyard, a closet door with bifold doors on the adjacent wall, and on the wall across from the window was the door to the hallway. My bed was pushed up against the wall by the door to the hallway with a dresser on the left side of the window. I lived close to a women's reformatory, and the best part was that the facility had those low glow orange lights. Sleeping at night was great, because the orange glow would sweep through the small crack in my curtains and allow for the perfect amount of light. It was around 2 to 3 a.m. when I woke up. Not groggy or anything from suddenly waking up, I laid staring at the wall. Staring at the shadows on the wall's surface, I knew something felt wrong. I remember slowly rolling over to get a look at the dark orange light from the window. Standing about the average 6 foot high was a man. A completely black silhouette with no features stood a person in my room. The outline of broad square shoulders brought the image of a suit, and on top of the figureless head sat a flat-brimmed fedora-style hat. In a split second of realization, I threw the covers over my head and sat in complete fear. Unsure of what to do or to even scream, I sat there in silence for what seemed like an hour. Tears on my face, I took slow, quiet breaths to listen for movement, but heard none. I finally gained the courage to throw my covers off violently and jump up to hit my light switch. The figure I had seen standing less than 5 feet from me was gone. My heart pounding out of my chest, I sat with the lights on for the rest of the night. Telling myself that I wasn't crazy that night is really the only thing that keeps it so close and real. I know I wasn't asleep. I wasn't imagining things. I know what I saw and felt. Reading many things over the years, I feel that people tend to point towards the shadow people and sleep paralysis, but this has always felt like something different to me. The memory of this incident has followed me into my adult years, and not necessarily as a bad thing. I've come to terms with my experience, and have seen it as a thing that opened my eyes to the paranormal. I have family members that are skeptics, but I have some that have always believed in the idea of spirits as well. I still look over my shoulder in the dark when sleeping from time to time, but don't seem as scared. I almost have grown to see it as maybe the Hat Man was a good guy, just seen in a scary way. And that was 10 horrifying shadow people stories. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. And feel free to submit your own horror stories to be featured on this show. You can comment, DM me on social media, email me, as long as they're not profane or anything. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on Horror Highway.